Before we jump in and talk about when metadata needs to be managed, I want to ask a simple question. What did you have for breakfast this morning? If you're like me, you can probably remember, this morning, and you can say something like, I had banana bread. That's what I had for breakfast this morning. I can easily remember that. We all have a pretty good short-term memory for things like this, so I want to ask a slightly different question this time. What did you have for breakfast 2 weeks ago? 14 days ago, what did you have for breakfast? Now, if you're the kind of person who has a regular breakfast, they eat the same thing every day, you're probably able to answer me. But for many of us, there might have been something that came up. Maybe we had to skip breakfast that day, or maybe we were out of the thing that we wanted to have. It may be harder for you to remember if you even remember at all. So let's make it a little bit more challenging. What did you have for breakfast 2 years ago? Now, if you're the kind of person who has a routine, regular breakfast, you probably know what you had two weeks ago. 2 years ago is a whole different challenge. Unless you've written that down somewhere, it's highly unlikely that you'd be able to answer that for me. Maybe you can, and maybe you can comment below, well, what did you have for breakfast 2 years ago? But if you can't remember it, don't feel bad. Most of us probably wouldn't be able to say the answer to this at all. The reason that you probably have difficulty remembering what you had for breakfast 2 years ago is quite simple. If we don't write stuff down, we forget it. There was a really simple model developed in the 1800s called the forgetting curve, which showed that over time we forget things. Whether or not it's people or organizations, over time, the things that we thought we knew slowly start to slip away. We can't remember everything we did all the time. So over time, we forget things. So the forgetting curve is a really easy way for us to model what's going to happen if we don't document things. And it's been shown time and time again in psychology research that there's two very simple ways for us to combat the forgetting curve. And that's documenting things as early as possible. The sooner you write something down, the more likely you are to remember it. So if you were interested in having a diary of your breakfast, writing down what you had for breakfast this morning today is more important than trying to write what you had for breakfast 2 weeks ago and trying to keep it up to date like that. We know this, we see it all the time. We want to make sure that as soon as something happens, we document it in a place that it's easy to find, and then we review it frequently. What we want to do is review that information as early as we can to make sure that we're constantly refreshing ourselves. And we see the same thing in our organizations as well. What we want to do is make sure that we're documenting things in our organizations, whether or not that's data or processes or whatever it is, and we review it constantly. That's the easiest way for us to combat that forgetting curve. So what we want to do is make sure that whenever people update or create new data, whenever they're doing any of these business activities that involve them updating or creating data sets, we want to make sure that they update that documentation as early as possible. We want to make sure that they're producing documentation that describes what their data is, why it's useful, and how it can be used as early as we can. The other thing that we need to do is make sure that we're working as a team to capture all of those perspectives. In the last section, what we saw was that data and metadata isn't just a technical challenge, it's a business challenge as well. We can't just rely on somebody writing down what columns are in a data set. We know that. It comes from the system itself. We want to make sure we're capturing that meaning. Why did we collect it? How did we collect it? Where's it come from? And we want to make sure that we're getting as many people as possible understanding that, so we've got more people seeing it and more people reviewing that business knowledge over time. And then lastly, we want to make sure that business areas are talking with people like ourselves. We want to make sure that there are metadata experts in organizations whose job is focused not on the delivery of those business activities, but around the supporting of that documentation, making sure that whenever we're creating this documentation, somebody is reviewing it for completeness. And it's that reviewing of the documentation of these business processes that becomes a really key and critical part of data governance that we'll talk about in a future module. This is why I like to say that data documentation is an everybody activity. We all need to play a part, And it needs to be part of our business as usual. Like, it needs to be something that we're always doing. What this means is that every time data is created or updated, we need to make sure people know what question them to answer. What are the questions that we need to know about data to govern it effectively? It also means that we need to encourage everybody. Anyone who makes a change to data becomes responsible for documenting what that change is. This is just like all of our policies and all of our procedures. If somebody's making a change, we want them to be responsible for recording that, and we want them to record it against who that person was. And it also means that we want to be very clear with what we want them to answer. And that starts with questions like, where is the data stored? What is it about? Why was it collected? But most importantly, who made the change? Because that tells us who we can talk to when we need to get more information. And it's knowing who we can talk to, which is a really important part of data governance, because we want to capture that. We want to work with people to make sure that they're doing the right thing and that we're getting all of that knowledge into a place that we can manage more effectively.